Beyond the towering observation windows of Velar Station 9, the stars blazed like frozen embers scattered across an endless sea of darkness. Suspended between the great trade routes of the galaxy, the colossal station dominated the void, a sprawling metropolis of steel and light so immense that entire cities could have fit within its rotating rings. For centuries, it had served as the political and economic heart of known space, where dozens of civilizations gathered to negotiate alliances, settle disputes, exchange knowledge, and shape the future of the stars. But today, the station carried an atmosphere unlike any in living memory. The greatest diplomatic summit in 300 years was only hours away. From every corner of the galaxy, ships streamed toward Velar Station 9 in an endless procession. Sleek diplomatic couriers slipped gracefully into their assigned berths. Agile reconnaissance craft darted between docking lanes. Colossal merchant convoys lumbered through space like floating continents, and heavily armed escort cruisers maintained silent vigil around the gathering. Each arriving vessel carried rulers, ambassadors, admirals, and representatives whose decisions could determine the fate of entire civilizations. By the end of the day, history would remember Velar Station 9, not for its size, but for the choices made within its walls, carrying entire royal courts within their metal walls. The station's docking bays filled with vessels of every shape and color. Aliens of all kinds walked through the wide corridors, their translators humming softly as they tried to understand each other. Among all these important visitors, there was a small human delegation. Humans were still new to galactic politics. They had only discovered faster-than-light travel about 80 years ago. Most alien species saw them as children, young and inexperienced. Some thought humans were too emotional. Others thought they were too fragile. But humans had earned their place at this summit through hard work and determination. Daniel Carter was not a diplomat. He was not important. He was just a security guard, one of 12 assigned to protect the human delegation. He stood at his post in a corridor near the royal quarters, his back straight, and his hands clasped behind him. He wore the simple gray uniform of Earth's diplomatic security service. There were no medals on his chest, no special marks of honor. He was just a man doing his job. Daniel was 32 years old. He had hazel eyes that seemed to change color in different light, sometimes green, sometimes brown. His jaw was strong, and his brown hair was cut short in a practical military style. He was not the tallest man, but he carried himself with quiet confidence. When he looked at someone, he really looked at them, giving them his full attention. It was a small thing, but people noticed. He had been a soldier once, fighting in the border conflicts near the outer colonies. He had seen friends die. He had killed enemies who were trying to kill him. When the wars ended, he found himself lost. Fighting was all he knew. A friend suggested he join the security service, and so he did. It was not exciting work, but it was honest. He protected people. That was enough. The corridor was busy that morning. Alien diplomats and their servants walked past him in a constant stream. Daniel nodded politely to each one even when they ignored him. Most aliens did not pay attention to human guards. Humans were beneath their notice. Daniel did not mind. He preferred being invisible. It made his job easier. Then the Valanthia arrived. Daniel had read about them in his briefing documents. The Valanth Empire was one of the oldest and most powerful civilizations in the galaxy. They lived for centuries, sometimes for over 1,000 years. Their technology was far beyond anything humans could understand. They were beautiful in a strange, unsettling way, with silver skin that seemed to glow from within and eyes in shades of purple, blue, and gold. The Valanthi delegation walked down the corridor, in perfect formation. Their guards wore armor made of something that looked like liquid metal. Their advisors carried data pads and spoke in low musical voices. And at the center of them all was their queen. Queen Sarah had ruled the Valanthi Empire for over 200 cycles. In human years, that was nearly 3 centuries. She was tall and graceful, with silver skin that shimmered like moonlight on water. Her hair was long and white, falling past her shoulders like a waterfall of silk. Her eyes were deep violet, the color of a sunset on a distant world. She wore robes of dark blue and silver, and a thin crown of crystal rested on her head. She walked with the easy confidence of someone who had never been questioned, never been challenged. Every step she took was perfect. Every movement was controlled. She was power made flesh, beauty made real. The other aliens in the corridor stepped aside for her without being asked. Daniel watched her approach. He had seen many powerful people in his life, generals and politicians and corporate leaders, but he had never seen anyone like her. She was not just powerful. She was ancient. She carried centuries of history in her eyes. He stood at attention as she passed. It was his job to be invisible, to be just another guard at just another post. He expected her to walk past without a glance. She did not. Queen Sarah was thinking about the summit. She was thinking about the trade agreements she needed to negotiate and the alliances she needed to strengthen. She was not thinking about humans. Humans were irrelevant to her plans. They were too young, too weak, too short-lived to matter. Then she saw the guard. He was standing at his post like all the other guards she had passed. He was human, dressed in the simple uniform of his people. There was nothing special about him, nothing that should have caught her attention, but his face. His face stopped her heart. She knew that face. She knew those eyes, that jaw, that quiet strength in his posture. She had seen that face every day for 50 years. She had kissed those lips. She had held that body close to hers in the darkness of their chambers. It was Kalen, her husband, her love, the man who had died 200 years ago in a border skirmish with raiders, the man whose body had never been recovered, the man she had mourned every single day since. But it could not be Kalen. Kalen was dead. Kalen was Valanth. This was a human, a creature who would live less than a century. It was impossible. And yet, Queen Sarah stopped walking. Her feet simply refused to move. Her breath caught in her throat. Her heart, which had been cold and controlled for so long, suddenly pounded in her chest like a drum. Her advisors noticed immediately. They gathered around her, their faces worried. One of them asked if she was unwell. Another offered to call a physician. She waved them away with a sharp gesture. The human guard noticed the commotion. He looked at her, and his eyes were soft with concern. He nodded his head respectfully. A small gesture of acknowledgement. It was the same way Callan used to greet her when they were in public. A tiny private signal between them. Of course, this human did not know that. Of course, it was just a coincidence. But the gesture hit her like a physical blow. She forced herself to move. She forced her feet to carry her past the guard, past the memory he represented. She kept her face calm, and her posture perfect. No one could know what she was feeling. No one could see the storm inside her. But as she walked away, she looked back just once. The guard was still standing at his post, doing his duty. He did not know what he had done. He did not know that he had just shattered 200 years of carefully built walls. Queen Sarah turned away and continued walking. Her advisors hurried to keep up with her. The summit was waiting. Duty was waiting. But for the first time in 2 centuries, she was not thinking about duty. She was thinking about a human with hazel eyes and a face that belonged to a ghost. 3 days passed after that first encounter. 3 days of meetings and negotiations and formal dinners. 3 days of Queen Sarah performing her duties with the same grace she had shown for centuries. No one noticed anything different about her. No one saw the storm that raged beneath her calm surface. But every night, when she returned to her quarters, she thought about the human guard. She told herself it was foolish. She told herself that the resemblance was just a trick of her tired mind. Humans and head were completely different species. There was no way a human could look like Athi. And yet when she closed her eyes, she saw his face. Those hazel eyes, that strong jaw, the way he had nodded to her with quiet respect. It was the same way Kalen used to look at her. Queen Sarah had been married to Prince Kalen for 50 years. In Valanthi terms, that was a short time, barely the beginning of their life together. They had been young and in love, full of dreams for the future. He was a warrior, brave and kind, with a gentle heart that he hid behind his armor. She was a princess trained from birth to rule, but with him, she had learned to laugh. Then the raiders came. They struck at the outer borders of the empire, fast and brutal. Kalen led the defense himself as he always did. He believed that a prince should fight alongside his soldiers, not hide behind them. It was one of the things she loved about him. The battle lasted 3 days. The raiders were eventually defeated, but at a terrible cost. When the survivors returned, Kalen was not among them. His ship had been destroyed. His body was never found. She waited for him for 10 years. She sent search parties to every corner of that sector. She offered rewards so large that treasure hunters came from across the galaxy. But no one ever found him. No one ever found even a piece of his ship. Eventually, she had to accept the truth. Callan was dead. He was gone. And he was never coming back. She threw herself into her duties. She became the queen her people needed. Cold and efficient, and utterly devoted to the empire. She never married again. She never even considered it. How could she give her heart to someone else when it was buried in the stars with Callan? And now, 200 years later, she had seen his face on a human guard. On the fourth day, she made a decision. She would find out more about this human. It was not because she was interested in him, she told herself. It was simply because she needed to understand why he affected her so strongly. Once she understood, she could put him out of her mind and focus on her duties. She sent a quiet request through diplomatic channels. She asked for information about the human security team assigned to the station. It was not an unusual request. Many alien delegations wanted to know who was protecting them. No one would think anything of it. The information arrived within hours. She read through the files of each guard until she found him. Daniel Carter, age 32, born on a farming colony in the Outer Territories, parents deceased, no siblings, no spouse, no children. He had served in the Earth military for 8 years. He had fought in the border conflicts that humans were always having with one another. His record showed several commendations for bravery, but also a note that he had refused promotion multiple times. He did not want to lead others into danger. The note said he preferred to face danger himself. It was so like Callan that it hurt. After leaving the military, Daniel had joined the Diplomatic Security Service. He had been a guard for 4 years. His supervisors described him as reliable, calm, under pressure, and unusually kind to the people he protected. One report mentioned that he had once stayed with a frightened diplomat's child for 3 hours during a lockdown, telling her stories to keep her calm. Queen Sarah read that report twice. She could picture it perfectly. This human guard sitting with a scared child, his voice gentle, as he spun tales of adventure. Callan would have done the same thing. She put the file away. She had learned what she wanted to know. This Daniel Carter was just a human, an ordinary man with an ordinary life. There was nothing special about him except for an accident of genetics that made him look like her dead husband. But she could not stop thinking about him. The next morning, she changed her walking route. Instead of taking the direct path from her quarters to the meeting halls, she took the longer route that passed through the corridor where Daniel was stationed. She told herself it was for exercise. She told herself she was simply exploring the station. She was lying to herself and she knew it. Daniel was at his post as always. He stood straight and still, his hands behind his back. He nodded politely as she passed, that same small nod he had given her before. She walked past without stopping, her face calm, her heart racing. She did the same thing the next day, and the day after that, she began to notice things about him. She noticed how he helped a lost alien child find its parents, kneeling down to speak at the child's level. With a warm smile, she noticed how he shared quiet jokes with another human guard, his eyes crinkling with silent laughter. She noticed how he always stood a little straighter when other aliens walked past, giving them the respect of his full attention, even when they ignored him. He was kind. He was humble. He was brave in a quiet way that did not ask for recognition. He was everything Callan had been, wrapped in a human body. Her advisors began to notice her new walking route. They mentioned it carefully, the way advisors always mentioned things they were worried about. They pointed out that humans were a lesser species. They reminded her that humans lived barely a century, a blink of an eye compared to Valanthe lifespans. They suggested very gently that perhaps she was spending too much time near the human delegation. She dismissed their concerns with a wave of her hand. She was the queen. She could walk wherever she pleased. And besides, she was not doing anything wrong. She was simply walking through a corridor. There was nothing improper about that. But late at night, alone in her quarters, she knew the truth. She was drawn to this human in a way she could not explain. It was not just his face. Though that face haunted her dreams, it was something deeper. It was the way he carried himself, the way he treated others, the way he seemed completely unaware of his own worth. Humans were supposed to be arrogant and aggressive. That was what the other species said. But this human was neither. He was gentle. He was patient. He was good. Queen Sarah had lived for over 3 centuries. She had seen empires rise and fall. She had negotiated with the most powerful beings in the galaxy. She had faced death and loss and survived, but she had never felt so confused. She did not know what she wanted. She did not know what she was doing. She only knew that every morning she looked forward to walking through that corridor and seeing the human with hazel eyes. And every night she dreamed of Kalan's face and woke up reaching for someone who was not there. The attack came on the 8th day of the summit. It started with an explosion in the lower decks of station Velar 9. The blast shook the entire station, sending alarms screaming through every corridor. Lights flickered. Emergency doors slammed shut. The calm order of the diplomatic summit collapsed into chaos in seconds. Queen Sarah was in a meeting when it happened. She was discussing trade routes with a delegation of crystalline beings from the Nexar system when the floor shook beneath her feet. Her guards reacted immediately, surrounding her in a protective circle. Her advisors shouted orders into their communicators, trying to find out what was happening. The reports came in quickly. An unknown faction had infiltrated the station. They had set off multiple explosions to create confusion. Their true target was still unknown, but they were armed and dangerous. The Valanthi guards moved to escort Queen Sarah to safety. They had a secure room prepared for exactly this kind of situation. A vault deep in the station, where no attacker could reach her. But as they moved through the corridors, another explosion rocked the station. The ceiling collapsed. Dust and debris filled the air. Queen Sarah was thrown to the ground by the force of the blast. When she opened her eyes, she could barely see through the smoke. Her ears were ringing. Her guards were gone, buried under tons of metal and stone. She could hear their groans somewhere in the darkness, but she could not reach them. She forced herself to stand. She was the queen of the Valanthi Empire. She would not die crawling on the floor like a wounded animal. She stumbled through the smoke trying to find a way out of the destroyed corridor. That was when she heard the footsteps behind her. She turned and saw two figures emerging from the smoke. They wore dark armor and carried weapons she did not recognize. Their faces were hidden behind masks. They moved toward her with the calm confidence of trained killers. Queen Sarah had powers that most aliens could not dream of. The Valanthi could manipulate energy with their minds, bending light and heat to their will. But using these powers took concentration, and her head was still spinning from the explosion. She raised her hand, trying to summon her strength, but her vision blurred, and her focus slipped. The first attacker raised his weapon. She saw the barrel point at her chest. She saw his finger move toward the trigger. Then a gray blur slammed into him from the side. Daniel Carter had been running through the station when the second explosion hit. He was supposed to be protecting the human delegation, but the explosion had separated him from his team. He had been trying to find his way back when he heard sounds of a struggle in a damaged corridor. He did not think, he simply acted. He hit the first attacker with all his weight, knocking the weapon from his hands. They crashed to the ground together, rolling through the debris. The attacker was strong and well-trained, but Daniel was faster. He slammed his elbow into the attacker's throat, then grabbed the fallen weapon and smashed it against the attacker's head. The man went limp. The second attacker moved toward the queen, drawing a knife from his belt. Daniel did not have time to stand. He threw himself forward, grabbing the attacker's legs and bringing him down. The knife slashed across Daniel's shoulder as they fell, cutting through his uniform and into his flesh. Pain exploded through his arm, but he ignored it. He wrestled the attacker to the ground, trading blows in the dust and debris. The attacker was bigger and stronger, but Daniel had learned to fight in places far worse than this. He had learned that size did not matter when you were fighting for your life. He had learned that the one who wanted to win more was the one who won. He wanted to win more. A final punch, perfectly placed, and the second attacker stopped moving. Daniel lay on the ground for a moment, breathing hard. His shoulder was bleeding badly, soaking his uniform with dark red blood. His hands were shaking, but he was alive and the attackers were not. He forced himself to stand and turned to face the queen. She was staring at him. Her violet eyes were wide, her silver face pale with shock. She was covered in dust, and her robes were torn, but she was unharmed. He had reached her in time. He straightened up, trying to ignore the pain in his shoulder. He met her eyes and asked the only question that mattered. "Are you hurt, Your Majesty?" She could not speak. She could only stare at this human, this fragile creature who lived less than a century. This insignificant being from a young and primitive species. He had just fought 2 trained assassins with his bare hands. He had taken a knife wound to the shoulder. He was bleeding and shaking, and clearly in pain, and his first thought was to ask if she was hurt. Kalan would have done the same thing. Kalan had done the same thing many times. He had always put others before himself. He had always been the first into danger and the last to seek safety. It was how he died, leading a charge against raiders instead of waiting for reinforcements. But Kalan was Volanth. He had lived for centuries. He had training and powers and technology that humans could not imagine. This human had none of those things. He was just a man with his fists and his courage, and he had saved her life without a moment of hesitation. Queen Solara finally found her voice. "You saved me." Daniel shrugged and immediately winced from the pain in his shoulder. "It's my job, ma'am." It was such a simple thing to say, such a human thing to say. He had just risked his life for a queen of an alien species, and he called it his job. He did not ask for thanks. He did not demand recognition. He simply accepted his duty and fulfilled it. She felt something break inside her. The walls she had built over 2 centuries, the cold armor she had wrapped around her heart, all of it cracked and crumbled. This human, this Daniel Carter, had done what no one else had done in 200 years. He had made her feel again. Station security arrived minutes later. They found the Queen standing in the destroyed corridor, covered in dust, looking at a wounded human guard. They took the attackers into custody. They called medical teams for the injured. They escorted the Queen to safety, but she did not leave without giving one final order. She told them to take the human to the best medical facility on the station. She told them to treat his wound with the best technology they had. She told them that this man had saved her life, and she would not forget it. Then she walked away, surrounded by her guards, her face once again calm and controlled. But inside, everything had changed. Daniel woke up in a medical bay that looked like something from a dream. The walls were smooth and white, glowing with soft light that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. The bed beneath him was more comfortable than anything he had ever slept on. Machines he could not understand hummed quietly around him, monitoring his body with technology far beyond human science. His shoulder did not hurt anymore. He looked down and saw that the wound was almost completely healed. Where the knife had cut deep into his flesh, there was now only a thin pink scar. Valanthi medicine was remarkable. A nurse, a small alien with blue skin and 4 arms, noticed that he was awake. She told him that he had been unconscious for 12 hours. She told him that his wound had been serious, but that their technology had repaired the damage. She told him that he could leave soon, but that he had a visitor waiting. Daniel expected his commanding officer. He expected someone from the human delegation, probably angry that he had broken protocol by engaging attackers alone. He did not expect the door to open and reveal Queen Solara of the Valanthi Empire. She walked into the room like she owned it, which she probably did. Her robes today were deep purple. The color of her eyes, her silver skin glowed softly in the light of the medical bay. She was beautiful in a way that made his chest tight, like looking at a sunset or a distant galaxy. Beautiful and impossibly far away, but she was here in his room, looking at him with an expression he could not read. Daniel tried to stand up. He did not know the proper protocol for greeting a queen while wearing a hospital gown, but he was sure it did not involve lying down. She stopped him with a gentle gesture. "Please," she said, "do not rise. You are still recovering." Her voice was like music, soft and flowing. He had heard her speak before at formal gatherings, but never directly to him. Never like this, in a quiet room with no one else around. "Your Majesty," he said, because he had to say something. "I'm honored by your visit." She smiled slightly. It was a small smile, barely there, but it transformed her face. For a moment, she looked almost human. "You saved my life," she said. "Visiting you is the least I can do." She sat down in a chair beside his bed. It was strange seeing her sit like a normal person. Queens did not sit in hospital rooms. Queens did not visit human guards. But here she was, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes studying his face. "I wanted to thank you properly," she continued. "And I wanted to talk to you if you are willing." Daniel nodded. He was not sure what a queen could possibly want to talk to him about, but he was not going to say no. They talked. She asked him about his life, and he told her. He told her about growing up on a farming colony, about the endless fields of grain that stretched to the horizon. He told her about his parents who had died in an accident when he was young. He told her about joining the military because he did not know what else to do, and about the wars he had fought in, and about the friends he had lost. He told her about leaving the military when the wars ended. He told her about feeling lost and purposeless, wandering from job to job. He told her about joining the security service because a friend suggested it, and about finding peace in the simple work of protecting others. "I'm nothing special," he said. "Just a guy who wanted to do something useful." She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "You are special, Daniel Carter. You just do not see it. Man amnan mania. Man sedan. Mania nan sedan." He did not know how to respond to that. No one had ever called him special before. He was not sure he believed it. Then she began to talk about herself. She told him about her husband, Prince Kalan, who had died 200 years ago. She told him about their life together, their love, their dreams for the future. She told him about the battle where he died, and the 10 years she spent searching for him, and the day she finally accepted that he was gone. She told him about the 2 centuries she had spent since then ruling her empire, serving her people, never allowing herself to feel anything. She told him about the walls she had built around her heart, the armor she had worn for so long that she had forgotten she was wearing it. And then she told him the truth. "You look like him," she said quietly. "When I first saw you in that corridor, I thought I was seeing a ghost. Your face, your eyes, the way you carry yourself. You look so much like Callan that it stops my heart." Daniel did not know what to say. He had suspected something like this, based on the way she had looked at him, the way she had frozen when she first saw him. But hearing her say it out loud was different. "I'm sorry," he said. "I'm sorry that seeing me causes you pain." She shook her head. "No, you do not understand. At first, I thought that was why I was drawn to you, because you reminded me of him, because some part of me was trying to hold on to the past." She looked at him, and her violet eyes were bright with something that might have been tears. "But that is not why I came here today. I came because of what you did yesterday. You saved my life, Daniel. You fought 2 assassins with your bare hands. You took a knife wound to the shoulder. And when it was over, your first thought was to ask if I was hurt." She reached out and took his hand. Her skin was cool and smooth like polished metal. "I have lived for over 300 years, she said. "I have met warriors and kings and emperors. I have seen the greatest heroes of a dozen species, but I have never seen courage like yours. Not reckless courage, the kind that seeks glory and death. True courage, the kind that simply does what needs to be done, without asking for anything in return." She squeezed his hand gently. "You look like Callan. Yes, but you are not Callan. You are Daniel Carter, a human from a farming colony, a man who protects others, because it is the right thing to do. And that is why I am here. Not because you remind me of someone I lost, but because you have shown me something I thought I would never see again." Daniel looked at her, this ancient and powerful queen who had ruled an empire for centuries, and for the first time, he did not see a queen. He saw a woman, a lonely woman who had spent 200 years grieving. "What did I show you?" he asked. She smiled, and this time, the smile was real. Hope. The summit ended 5 days later. The attack had disrupted many of the negotiations, but in a strange way, it had also brought the different species closer together. They had faced a common enemy, and that shared danger had reminded them why they were there in the first place. Daniel had returned to his duties as soon as the doctors cleared him. His shoulder was fully healed, though sometimes he still reached up to touch the scar. It was a reminder that what had happened was real. The fight, the queen, the conversation in the medical bay. He had not seen her since that day. She had returned to her own quarters, surrounded by her guards and advisors, busy with the endless work of running an empire. He understood. She was a queen. He was a guard. Their worlds were not meant to overlap, but he thought about her. Every night, when he lay in his small bed in the cramped quarters of the human delegation, he thought about her violet eyes and her silver skin, and the way her hand had felt in his. He thought about the loneliness in her voice when she talked about her husband. He thought about the word she had whispered before she left, hope. He did not know what to do with that word. He did not know what she wanted from him. He did not even know what he wanted himself. All he knew was that something had changed inside him, something he could not explain or ignore. On the last day of the summit, the delegations prepared to leave. Ships were loaded, farewell ceremonies were held. Diplomats exchanged final handshakes and promises to stay in touch. The human delegation was scheduled to depart at noon, and Daniel spent the morning packing his few belongings and checking his equipment. He was just finishing when someone knocked on his door. He opened it, expecting a fellow guard or an officer with final orders. He found one of the Volanth advisors, a tall alien with golden eyes who looked at him with barely hidden disapproval. "The Queen requests your presence," the advisor said stiffly. "You will follow me." Daniel followed. They walked through the corridors of Station Velar 9, past diplomats and guards and servants, until they reached the royal quarters. The guards at the door stepped aside, and Daniel was led into a room more beautiful than anything he had ever seen. The walls were made of something that looked like crystal, catching the light and scattering it into rainbows. The floor was smooth and white, like polished marble. The furniture was elegant and strange, designed for bodies that moved differently than human bodies. And standing by a large window looking out at the stars was Queen Sarah. She turned when he entered. She was wearing her formal robes today, deep blue and silver, the same color she had worn when he first saw her. The crown of crystal rested on her head. She looked every inch the queen she was, but her eyes were soft. Her expression was uncertain. For the first time, she looked nervous. The advisor left them alone. The door closed with a quiet click. They stood in silence for a long moment. Two people from different worlds trying to find the right words. "I asked you here because I have something to tell you," she said finally. "Something I should have said in the medical bay, but I was not brave enough." Daniel waited. He did not trust himself to speak. She took a deep breath. "I have spent 200 years alone. I have told myself that I was honoring my husband's memory, that I was protecting my heart, that I was doing what was best for my empire. But the truth is, I was afraid. Afraid to love again. Afraid to lose again." She walked toward him, her steps slow and careful. "When I saw you in that corridor, something woke up inside me. At first, I told myself it was just the resemblance, just an old woman clinging to the past. But after you saved my life, after we talked, I understood the truth. You are not Kaylin. You are something new, something I never expected to find." She stopped in front of him close enough that he could see the light reflecting in her eyes. "I care for you, Daniel Carter, not as a shadow of my husband, but as the man you are. I know this is strange. I know you are human, and I am Volanthi. I know your people live barely a century, while mine live for millennia. I know my advisors think I have lost my mind, and perhaps they are right." She reached out and touched his face, her fingers cool against his skin. "But I am tired of being afraid. I am tired of living in the shadow of the past, and I am asking you with whatever courage I have left, if you would stay, if you would give me a chance to know you better, if you would consider a life at my side." Daniel looked at her. He saw the fear in her eyes, the vulnerability she was showing him. He understood what this was costing her. This ancient queen who had not allowed herself to feel for 2 centuries. "I'm just a guard," he said. "I'm nobody special. I'll live maybe 60 more years, maybe less. I can't give you the life you deserve." She smiled and tears gleamed in her violet eyes. "You are wrong," she said. "You are the most special person I have ever met. You do not seek power. You do not crave glory. You simply do what is right, because it is right. In a galaxy full of scheming nobles and power-hungry emperors, you are simply good. That is the rarest thing in the universe." She took his hands in hers. "I do not need 1,000 years. I do not need forever. I just need someone who will be honest with me, who will care for me, who will stand beside me without asking for anything in return. I need you, Daniel, however long we have." He looked at their hands, hers silver and smooth, his rough and scarred. He thought about his simple life, his small dreams, his belief that he would never amount to anything important. And he thought about this woman, this queen who had chosen him out of everyone in the galaxy. He could not promise her forever. Humans could not promise that, but he could promise her today. "I'll stay," he said, "for as long as you'll have me." She pulled him into her arms, and he held her close. She was taller than him, and her body felt different from any human woman, but somehow it felt right. Somehow it felt like coming home. Outside the window, the stars burned cold and distant. Ships departed for their homeworlds. The galaxy spun on, vast and uncaring. But in that room, 2 people held each other and made a promise that defied all logic and reason. A human guard and an alien queen, choosing each other against all odds. Because in the end, the greatest force in the universe was not technology, or power, or ancient wisdom. It was the stubborn, beautiful courage of the heart. It was the willingness to love again. Even when love seemed impossible, it was the simple truth that sometimes the smallest person could mean more than all the empires in the sky. Daniel and Sarah stood together at the window, watching the stars. They did not know what the future would bring. They did not know how the galaxy would react. They only knew that they had found each other, and that was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything.